The information presented today is copyrighted and all rights are reserved by EJC Advantage LLC and Jacqueline A. Close and Edward R. Close. Please enjoy our presentation. And today we're going to be talking about, and Ed, if you'll go ahead and change to the next screen. Today we're going to be talking about essential oils, the quantum connection. And I'm very, very pleased to introduce my wonderful husband. Go to the next screen now, honey. Dr. Ed Close. And you're going to get a little bit of insight into my life as well as his, because he loves to talk about this, and of course we talk about it all the time. The thing that I want you to know is that generally when we do these programs, it's focused almost entirely on oils. But today you're going to get a little insight into how the oils really work. And it's such a privilege and an honor for me to be with Ed. And to be honest, you know, it's wonderful to be around scientists and to be around people who love God. And when you find the same thing in one person, it's a real treat. It makes your life so beautiful. And you get such deep insights into God's love. And David Stewart and Ed are both that type of person. They're real true scientists, but they both love God. And they both love God. David is a little more expressive of his love for God. Ed is a little more of the probing, deep thinker that doesn't talk so much about love for God. He has it, but he doesn't talk so much about it. But what he does and what he explains to me gives me such deep insights into God's love for us. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted him to present this information today. Because what he's been working on, which is a lot of it is research that he's developing, that he's doing personally. It's new for science, and it is going to have a huge impact on science, we think, in the very near future, because it's getting a lot of attention around the world. And the beauty of it is what it actually tells us about God's love for us and what he had planned from the very beginning of creation for each one of us. And so Ed's background, just so you know, he's a mathematician, physicist, and cosmologist. He has a BA in math and physics. It was a double major. He has a graduate program MS in theoretical physics, and he has a PhD in environmental science and engineering. Now, Ed is also a member of a number of different high IQ societies, and several of them you have to have an IQ of 160 or above, so he, in addition to other requirements. And he has joined these IQ societies in the last 10 years since we've been using oils. And the beauty of this is he didn't really know that he had such a high IQ. And when he started being able to qualify for some of these things, he went back and found out that his IQ had been rated at 160 or above from the time he was in high school, but he never knew it. So he has a very strong scientific background, and he has a very unique way of looking at the world, and his insights have given me deeper insights into God's love. So I'm very, very honored to be able to share him and his information with you. I hope you enjoy the presentation. Okay, honey.
Oh, okay. My goodness, that was such an introduction. I'm in awe of myself. That's amazing. Thank you, sweetie, for that introduction. I hope I can live up to it. Let's go on. I want to talk about real quickly what I'm going to do. I always like to start with something a little bit humorous, because I think laughter is one of the best medicines. And it made me think when I was starting this, preparing this presentation of the story about the old-time preacher in the South who was so popular, everybody was coming to hear his sermons, and the newscasters got there and they asked him, well, why, what do you do, what's your method? And he said, well, I do my sermon in 3 parts. First, I tells them what I'm going to tell them, then I tells them, and then I tells them what I done told them. Now, those 3 parts, and it's kind of interesting to me because, you know, Jackie's talking about science and the fact that Dr. Stewart and I are scientists lifelong, and that I'm doing a lot of ongoing research and that sort of thing. Scientists, sometimes people think they can't understand you because you're going to speak in multi-syllable words. It makes me think of Mary Poppins. Do you remember the story when she said to the children, she said, supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. If you keep saying it, you're bound to sound precocious. And I think that's what scientists do sometimes, especially the ones that maybe aren't that, their understanding doesn't have to be that deep, but if they can say the big words, then they sound like a scientist. Well, scientists present their findings in 3 parts, just like the old preacher, only they don't call it, tell them what I'm going to tell them, I told them, and then I tell them what I done told them. What the scientist says is, well, we have an abstract here that outlines the major points of our presentation with keywords and that sort of thing, and has to fit a certain format. And then we go into our presentation in great detail, and then at the end we give a nice little summary which gives the major points just to make sure you got them, and a list of references. But that's just another way of saying, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you, then I'm going to tell you, and then afterwards I'll tell you what I done told you. So in this presentation, we're bringing out science out of the dark ages, in my opinion. By that I mean scientists, increasing number of them today, will proclaim that they don't believe in God. They think that's just a myth and fairy tale, and will call themselves atheists. I think that's a mistake, of course, and if you're an atheist, that means against God, but if you don't believe in God, how can you be against God? So, you know, to announce that you're an atheist. Anyway, what we need to do, and the reason science has gone this way and become increasingly materialistic over time, is because they don't have consciousness in the equations of science. They don't have God, in other words, because God is the source of consciousness. So we have to put consciousness into the equations, and we're going to talk about that a little bit today. And then we're going to talk about something that I call true units, and I will define those later on. But just now, this is a way to put consciousness into the equations, and then we'll talk about how that relates to natural organic compounds, which of course brings us to young living essential oils. Now let's start out by asking, what is quantum physics? Because my wife used to say that you could start talking about anything, any subject on the planet, and within 10 minutes I would be talking about quantum physics. Well, there might be a reason for that. So what is a quantum, and what should you really know about it? You don't need to be a quantum physicist to understand. It's just like you don't need to be an electrician in order to flip the switch and turn the light on. But the more you know about how it works, the better it will work for you. So what is a quantum? The entire universe is made up of quanta, and I'm going to go through this rather quickly. I did this, most of this presentation in Florida in January, so if any of you were there, this is a similar presentation, although it's been naturally updated a little bit and abbreviated in some places. So quanta, the whole Earth is composed of quanta, matter and energy, and something else, which we're going to talk about. Human beings, everything about us, our skeletal, muscular, nervous system, organs, all these things are, in the ultimate sense, made up of quanta. And the brain, most importantly, is one of those organs that's made up of quanta. And this is a depiction of a brain cell with synapses and so forth that's inside your head, and that is the basis for seeing and understanding and a lot of the reality that we experience. And molecules are made up of atoms in certain very stable arrangements. This particular depiction happens to be the DNA molecule, a very important one. We'll talk a little bit about that and true units and essential oils as we go forward. Then we get down to the structure within each of those atoms, those little orange and green and blue, orange, green, and blue round ball thingies here are atoms, and in each one of those we've got quarks, we've got electrons. The quarks combine to form protons and neutrons, and you see sizes here. If you look down, you probably can't read this very fine print, but it says if this picture were drawn to the scale given by the protons and neutrons, then the quarks and electrons would be less than 1/10 of a millimeter across, and the entire atom would be about 10 kilometers across. Now, probably most of you aren't used to thinking in terms of the metric system, so let me translate that for you into our system. We call it the English system, but interestingly enough, the UK, the English, converted to the metric system quite a few years ago. We're one of the few places on the earth that still use the, quote, English system, so it probably should be called the American system. Okay, here's the translation. If these quarks, the little things with the U's and the D's, those are up quarks and down quarks, and there are other kind of quarks. If these were an inch across, the whole atom would be 15 miles across. So if you can imagine in an atom, you've got these things down in the nucleus that are about, say, the size of a ping pong ball, and then the nucleus, the entire nucleus of the atom is maybe the size of an automobile. And then the electrons are circling way out about 15 miles away. So there's an awful lot of, quote, empty space in between these things that science has identified within the structure of everything. Now, there are several scientific paradigms now, and I won't go into a lot of detail here, so I'm going to go fairly fast through some of these things, but I'm going to show you some things so that you know there's real hard science and real detail behind all this. It's different than just saying that we believe certain things are true when we can demonstrate and prove them on the basis of scientific data and scientific models. Now, for the universe on the galactic scale, relativity is the paradigm that works and answers a lot of questions that science was unable to answer before Einstein's relativity came along in the early part of the last century, in the 1920s and 30s. Now, on the human scale, we've got all kinds of science, but they're kind of fragmented. We've got chemistry and biology and psychology, but they all have their own language. They all have, in some cases, even their own mathematics, and sometimes they don't even talk to each other, so the whole picture is kind of hard to see. On the subatomic scale, so now we've gone from the big scale, the galactic, to the human scale, the everyday scale of you and me and baseballs and furniture and automobiles, to the subatomic particle, and that's where quantum mechanics takes over, and they have a whole new set of rules and mathematics and descriptions and so forth, but they don't all communicate, and in fact they actually disagree with each other. There are paradoxes that occur. But there's only one reality, so we really need one consistent paradigm. Now, I started working on this, my gosh, in the 1950s, actually, before anybody seemed to be interested in it at all. And now, several years ago, I published a book called Transcendental Physics, which is a new scientific paradigm. And in that book, and I'm just going to give you a really brief idea of what's in it, is a history of modern science and how it came to the point where it is now, and a history of the multidimensional theories of science. Not many people maybe realize, but Einstein and a German mathematician named Hermann Minkowski and another one named Wolfgang Pauli and a few people like that actually modeled our universe and our reality with a 4 or 5 dimensional model, and actually were able to answer some questions. But when they got beyond 5 dimensions, which string theory and other theories do now, and I could talk all day about them, but that's not what we're focused on here today. But I will do, in the book, there is a little bit about multidimensional theories of relativity. It introduces some new mathematics, the calculus of distinctions, and something I call dimensional extrapolation. And that's just a big mouthful of words for saying that you can actually move your attention, your consciousness from one dimension to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 and so on. And in the transcendental physics, I prove that consciousness, not matter, is primary. And for those of you who are believers, the primary consciousness is sometimes called the unmentionable word in science, spelled G-O-D. This is just a picture of my book, and it's available just about anywhere you want to look. Now, there's another model, a more detailed model that Dr. Vernon Neppy and I have been putting together over the past 4 or 5 years. We've been doing a lot of research. We call it TDVP, which stands for, and here you go, here's supercalifragilistic again, Triadic Dimensional Distinction Paradigm, TDVP. It's triadic because it's everything seems to occur in 3 parts, like 3 dimensions of space, etc. It's dimensional because we deal with extra dimensions beyond the 3 of space. It's a comprehensive theory, and it deals with the calculus of distinctions, which is a new form of mathematics that is actually prior to and encompasses all the mathematics that we have so far. And mathematics is a scary word for most people, but at the heart it's the way we all think. Now, we have to ask if an integrated paradigm is really possible, and here's something that Erwin Schrodinger, now if you remember hearing about Schrodinger's cat, he's the guy that did that when he first was really amazed by the new discoveries in quantum physics. And he said way back in 1967, which I remember very well, but some of you were probably very young, we are only beginning welding together the sum total of all that is known into a whole. But on the other hand, it is next to impossible for a single mind to fully comprehend more than just a small specialized portion of it. And this is, like I was saying, the biologists and physicists hardly can even talk to each other, and engineers and so forth all have their own language. And every scientist from Einstein to Stephen Hawking who has tried to find a, quote, theory of everything has failed. So how can Dr. Neppy and I possibly think that we might have succeeded where all these brilliant people have failed? Well, I had a little slide that says who are close and Neppy. I think it's important to know that we're not just a couple of guys that woke up one morning and said, we got this new idea. We've been, both of us, working on this for many years in our own specialized fields. But between us, we have combined professional experience as scientists of more than 70 years between the two of us. And between the two of us, we have demonstrated expertise, not just we know something about it. We've actually published and done research in all of these areas: mathematics, chemistry, physics, geology, biology, medicine, pharmacology, psychiatry, environmental science, engineering, alternative healthcare, metaphysics, philosophy, and we both have done a lot of writing and speaking and teaching, both in the formal sense and in an informal sense. We're both members of a number of professional organizations, like I'm a professional engineer. Dr. Neppy's been recognized as one of the 10 top physicians in the United States. He's a member of the Royal Society of Physicians in South Africa, which is his home where he grew up, although he's been in Washington State and Seattle for the past 20-some years. I only mention that we're members of these high IQ societies because sometimes I get people will say, well, what makes you think you know more than, say, Richard Feynman or some of these famous scientists? Why, you know, they were geniuses. Well, we have, both of us have documented IQs in the IQ stratosphere. We don't talk about it much, but we probably have a couple of the highest IQs ever registered. And so we're smart, but smart is not always necessarily a good thing. You can be too smart for your own good. And I don't care if you have an IQ of 200. If you don't use it, if you don't apply it and produce something that is useful to the world, then it's a waste of space. So IQ is much overrated, and the upper IQ societies that we belong to also emphasize creativity. So we've both also been very creative in our careers, coming up with new ideas and things that help lots of people. Okay, just quickly, what is TDVP? I already kind of told you what it stands for, the triadic dimensional distinction vortical paradigm. I haven't talked about vortical, but that's kind of like a vortex, you know, a tornado, of which we had a couple of days ago passing through this area with hail and everything like that. But we survived it. It's a bright sunny day, and this is a comprehensive paradigm shift from the old materialistic paradigm of current science. And this shift really works, providing a framework for all science. Important point is that it has been reviewed by more than 200 scientists in 23 countries. And it's still, we still have papers, technical papers, and books to come out that are at the present moment being reviewed by some of the top scientists, including Nobel Prize scientists around the world. This is one of our books, Reality Begins with Consciousness. It's available on Brain Voyage as an ebook. I'm just not going to spend a lot of time on this. And there's a sequel coming up called Space, Time, and Consciousness, the tethered triad, how these three things work together to form the universe that we know and love and experience and sometimes have a hard time with. The current scientific paradigm is more of a belief system in some ways, and I'll talk a little more about that, because scientists try to put forth the idea that only their view is correct. And if they don't happen to see a need for divinity or for a God or for a higher intelligence, then they don't believe anybody should. Well, this is not a scientific attitude. This is actually a belief system. It's a belief that there is nothing except matter and energy interacting in time and space. And I'm here to tell you that that's only the tip of the iceberg. That's only a part of the story, and we'll talk about that a little more. So the current scientific paradigm has a very materialistic bias, and those so-called theories of everything are really not theories of everything. What they really meant by that, and Einstein was clear about it. He didn't say, I have a theory that's going to explain why your Aunt Minnie died and came back as a ghost or anything like that. His theory, his definition of what he was looking for, which people later called a theory of everything, was how to explain the energies, the different fundamental forces of nature like gravity and electromagnetism and so forth, all in one consistent theory. But what's missing in that? Well, I'll tell you what's missing. Consciousness is the missing ingredient. You cannot have a theory of everything if everything not included in it. This is just common sense. There are many overlooked clues because of the materialistic basis, or bias, I should say, because of the materialistic bias of most scientists. They're overlooking very obvious clues. We have clear evidence that the conscious observer, that's you and me, actually participates in the forming of the reality that we experience. So we're going to look at some of the evidence, and again, I'm going to go through this rather rapidly, and I'm going to show you some fairly complicated stuff, but don't be worried by it or intimidated by it, because I'm not going to go into that detail. I'm just showing it to you so that you know that it's there, so you know that we have the science and the mathematics to back up the statements that we make. The evidence of direct involvement of your consciousness with reality goes back to the Einstein Bohr debate that happened around 1935. I wasn't very old then, and most of you weren't born. I was born in 1936, just for the record. The EPR Paradox, EPR stands for Einstein, Podolsky, and Rosen, was a thing that Einstein brought up to challenge quantum mechanics, which we'll talk about that a little more. Bell's inequality theorem was a theorem conceived and published by John Bell, an Irish mathematician and physicist working at CERN in Switzerland, that would prove who was right, Einstein or Bohr. And we'll talk about that a little bit in detail. The aspect experiment came along quite a few years later, unfortunately after Albert and Niels, Albert Einstein and Niels Bohr, had passed away, were no longer in the physical form. The aspect experiment actually proved that in the basic manner, Bohr was right and Einstein was wrong, although Einstein was right again in a more general sense, and we'll talk about that a little bit. We'll talk about the double slit experiment and delayed choice experiments, because they're good, simple examples of how the consciousness of the observer actually can affect the way physical reality behaves. And then finally, the Six Sigma, and Dr. Neppy is an expert in this field of psi phenomena. There are 9 different. Now, what Six Sigma means is that these are 9 different kinds of phenomena, like psychokinesis, which means the ability to move things just with your mind, and distant viewing, where you can people can actually tell you what's inside a closed room, and things like this that seem to defy our normal understanding of reality and human consciousness. there are 9 such areas that have been demonstrated to 6 sigma, that's 6 standard deviations actually, past what it would take to say that these are just random happenings that can't be explained. So when we say 6 sigma phenomena, it means that these have been proved to actually exist far beyond most proof in most areas of science. Now, the EPR paradox, just very quickly, don't worry about the details here, had to do with particles, subatomic particles, that emanated from a source, from a single source. And Einstein and friends said, you know what, we can set up an experiment here that this pair of particles, we can collect them at a distance from the source. It could be in a laboratory, or it could be halfway across the town or the lab, or halfway around the world, and as long as we have a straight line path for them and they're not interfered with by anything, we can collect these two, and because of the things we can know about one of them and the fact that they are always complementary when they come from this source, then we can know everything about both of them, and that violates the uncertainty principle, which is at the heart of quantum physics. So this was a big puzzle, and Bohr and his friends, Werner Heisenberg and Erwin Schrodinger, sat around and pondered this a while, and they came up with what's been called the Copenhagen Interpretation, because that's where Niels Bohr was located, in Copenhagen, Denmark. And the answer, they said, these subatomic particles, these little things we were talking about within the structure of the atom, exist. They don't exist as particles or localized objects at all until they're observed and measured. This was a clue that observation and measurement, in other words, consciousness of the observer, of you and me, had something to do with how these particles behaved. Now, Bell's inequality theorem, and the mathematics of it, is at the top of this little rectangle, so don't worry about it. It just said that certain parameters that can be measured will never exceed the value of 2. You see that all the way to the right in the upper right-hand corner there. And they set up this, it set up this experiment that would have to be done that would show if this happened to be bigger, greater, smaller than 2, I'm sorry, if the results showed a measurement smaller than 2, then Bohr would be right, and these particles did not exist as little objects traveling from the source to the collectors. They didn't exist in that form at all until they were actually observed. And if this could not be bigger than 2, in the case of Einstein's view that said they had to be like little baseballs, we just don't know enough about them to really predict, get all the information. So the results of this experiment, which wasn't carried out until several years later by a French experimental physics team headed by a man named Alain Aspect. I'm probably not pronouncing it correctly, but it's like Aspect, A-S-P-E-C-T. So it's been called the Aspect experiment. It's probably Aspect or something in French. The results of this was that elementary phenomena, that means quarks and photons and the primary elementary particles of reality, do not exist as particles or waves until they are observed or measured. This is amazing. Just a quick mention of the double slit experiment, because it's an easy way to visualize this. If you have light shining through 2 slits, you don't get just 2 beams of light on this plate at the very bottom of the picture. you get bands of light because the photons come through and they act like waves. They interfere. So in the dark spaces, they've interfered with each other. In the light spaces, they've added to each other or strengthened each other, and you get these bands. So this was taken as evidence as far back as in the 1800s by a man named Thomas. He was a physician, an English physician. At any rate, he took this to settle the argument between Sir Isaac Newton and some other scientists about whether light was particle or wave. He said, look at this, it's a wave. Then we found that if we cover one of these slits, you don't get that kind of interference. The light acts like particles with a bunch of little pinpoint spots, and it's just diffracted a little bit as it comes through one slot, but will cause a bunch of little pinpoints. So what was found out, whoops, let me back up one, was that if you cover a slot, you get particles. If you have both slots open and shine a light on it, you get waves. So whether you can decide as experimental scientists to either cover the slot or not, and so you have decided by your action whether you're going to see a wave or a particle. Now, a very famous scientist, who actually was a student of Albert Einstein, named John Wheeler, looked at this and said, you know what, if this is really true, if those photons don't exist as particles between the light source and where it is actually measured on the plate all the way at the bottom of the picture, then we could open and close those slots anytime we want to before it hits the screen, and we would always come up with with whichever one we wanted, waves or particles, even after it supposedly would have passed through the slits. This sounds rather amazing, but an experiment was put together to test this. It's called the delayed choice experiment. And I just show you this. Don't try to be too concerned with all the detail, because it would take me an hour to explain it. The detail is here because they had to make sure that these photons or other particles like electrons or quarks or whatever could not communicate with each other over this distance between the source and the plates where they were collected. So when they did this, and this has been done many times because people just couldn't believe it, it just showed more and more and more that Bell's inequality was violated, and that these things actually do not exist as little particles or waves or packets of waves or anything else until they are actually observed and measured. Now, a lot of scientists are perplexed by this.
Ed, hold
yes.
on just a minute.
Yeah.
You were fading in and out there, and I think it was because you were either had emphasis you were trying to make or something, but I just want people to understand that what you're saying is that light source, and Ed has explained this to me many times, that when they shown that light source, they could wait until the particles had already passed the slits to decide whether they were going to make it one slit or both slits were open. So this was after the light had already passed through those slits, was already headed toward the collection plate, and they then decided, okay, we're going to see if we can change what happens by closing either one slit or leaving them both open. And what actually happened showed that they could make that choice at any point to observe that light and determine after the fact how it would respond. So it seems like a total contradiction and impossibility, But the beauty of this is that it tells us of God's love. And I want you to speak just a little bit about that before you go further.
Okay. Thanks, Jackie, and I'll try. I get excited talking about this, and so I'm probably weaving back and forth, and excuse me just a minute. Getting away from my microphone, but I hope you can hear me.
Yeah.
We'll get into how this relates, but on this particular slide, I'm making the point that these scientists who are trained as materialists in a sense, because they're just looking at matter and energy and time and space, were shocked and in denial. Niels Bohr himself said he was absolutely shocked, and anybody who had come in contact with quantum theory and wasn't shocked really didn't understand it. And then along came Richard Feynman, which some of you may have heard of Richard. He was a very popular and a very brilliant lecturer at Caltech in Pasadena, California, who said, you know what, this stuff is just weird, this quantum physics, and we can show how it works and we can show the experimental results, but nobody really understands it. So don't worry about it, just move on. And Steven Weinberg, a Nobel Prize winning physicist, said the more we learn about reality, the more meaningless it becomes. My point is that these guys are missing something, aren't they? What are they missing? They're missing God's love, as Jackie expressed it. They're missing that there's something else in the works here, and what is missing? It's consciousness, whether it's our individualized consciousness or the greater consciousness which encompasses us all. Now, how do we go about putting consciousness into the equations? Because to me this was obvious as long ago as 20 or 30 years ago, that science needed to get with it and get consciousness expressed in the equations because it's part of what happens. Mass and energy simply don't tell the whole story. And in order for atoms and molecules and the things that make up our bodies and minds, bodies and brains and organs, are symmetric and stable. But in order to do that, we've found, and this is Dr. Neppy and I and our research have found, that a third something is needed, and it's not in the equations. That third something is the intelligent organizer that imparts awareness and meaning to matter and energy. So your brain is matter and energy, but your consciousness is far more than that. That third something is consciousness itself. Now, I'll talk just quickly about what I call true units. TRUE is an acronym which stands for Triadic Rotational Units of Equivalence. This is, I could give probably a 2-day lecture on TRUE, and we have some technical papers that are coming out, some of them being reviewed at the present time, peer-reviewed, describing this unit. It turns out that quarks, which are the basis of photons and protons and neutrons and atoms and molecules and organs and so forth, everything is made up of 3 elements. That's why we call it triadic. And they are rotational. They are spinning. There are units of mass, energy, and that's something else, which we're bold enough to call consciousness. And this upsets some of the materialistic scientists out there, but that's okay. That's what science is about, is to debate what's real and what's not. And the atomic elements, it turns out, is very interesting, making up the molecules of life. That's molecules like carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, things that make up our organs and blood and bodily fluids and so forth. turn out to have a higher number of true units of consciousness than the other elements, the inert elements and so forth. So this is a very interesting finding. Now, if you look at life as a struggle between meaningful structure and entropy, and there's another big word, actually it's not that big, it's just not familiar with, most people are not familiar with the word entropy. Entropy means lack of order. Maximum entropy is when there would be no distinction between any two things anywhere. If you wanted to just try to visualize it some way, you could imagine a universe of buttermilk or something, or water, that has no distinction anywhere. And the material, the mathematics of what's called the second law of thermodynamics tells you that physical objects tend to decay and degrade over time, and that's the law of entropy. Everything's going toward maximum entropy. However, consciousness is counter to that, and life is a struggle. Your life is a struggle between meaningful structure and understanding and love and light and disintegration. And don't think that you're bound eventually to disintegrate. We all die, we all get sick at times, but it's not necessary to associate yourself or attach yourself to that and say, oh my gosh, when my body goes, I'm gone. No, you're not, because you're more than matter and energy. You're also consciousness, and consciousness brings life and the brain brings individualized consciousness, which can maintain the structure. Now, if you add young living essential oils, and we'll explain why this is true, you can achieve longevity. You can live longer and be healthier. A lot of people are living longer today, but unfortunately many of them have very poor quality of life. Some of my high school classmates, the ones that are still living, are in rest homes with all kinds of, maybe on, 10 or 15 different drugs and so forth, which is really sad because that's a very poor quality of life. And here I am, thanks to Young Living Essential Oils and God's love. I'm going to be 80 one of these days before too awful long, and I still feel healthy and youthful. And I intend to stay that way for as long as I can, and when I can't, I intend to leave the body consciously and aware as I can, and as long as there is meaning and purpose and health, both mental and physical and spiritual, the result is that life wins a struggle between meaning and entropy. Now I want to mention the founder.
I'd like to go back to the last slide for just a minute, because I think you skipped over some things there that are kind of important. You see at the very top line it says primary C, and that stands for primary consciousness. And primary consciousness is God's consciousness. God's consciousness is omnipresent. It's everywhere. Ed talked about entropy. You could think of it as just a vast expanse of water. Well, that was the void out of which God created all things, folks. That's what maximum entropy is. But when God breathed on it and God moved in it and He gave us spirit, what is our consciousness that survives? It's a part of our spirit. It's awareness. It's that understanding. It's how we are true sons and daughters of God. And it is a thing in our experience that tells us that we are something other than the physical body. And that's God speaking to us, telling us we're spirit. And so Ed uses the term consciousness because of scientists' materialistic bias and the fact that they really, really do not like the word God. And generally, if you bring up the word God, they will just disavow and avoid looking at anything that you have to say. And he has struggled with this over the years, but I wanted you to know that when he uses consciousness, He uses primary consciousness as the consciousness of God. And the consciousness that we experience on a daily basis is individual consciousness. That's that spark of God that God breathed into us that makes us like Him, that allows us to create. When we make these observations, we're doing God's work. We are creating. We are bringing order and pattern and life into this universe. That's the understanding that I have gained as a result of the things Ed has taught me. So I wanted you to understand that part of it. Okay, honey.
Okay. Thank you, Jackie. You folks listening will appreciate what a wonderful thing it is for me to have Jackie. I need her to be with me everywhere I go because she often can explain things. You know, I learned a long time ago when I was teaching mathematics that sometimes something that I think is obvious, that I think I've covered and that everybody would understand perfectly well, they simply don't, and it bears repeating, and often being repeated by someone from a slightly different point of view. And so I really appreciate what my sweetheart and wife does for me, because I should never be on the stage really without her beside me, because she fills in the gaps that I may skip over in my enthusiasm to get on to the next thing. So I really appreciate that. But we would be remiss without giving credit to a real visionary, in my opinion, Dr. Gary Young. We've known Gary Young for quite a number of years now, and I've had the privilege and opportunity to sit and talk with him about a number of things. And this slide, most of you hopefully know about Gary, but he's a unique individual, and it starts with being a visionary. He saw that medicine was going in the wrong direction with pharmaceutical drugs and unnatural results and so forth. And through his own experience of nearly dying from a timber accident, he found and researched and did all this research for years and years into oils and how to best farm and distill them and have the highest possible quality of therapeutic grade essential oils. Can't say too much about how important that is. There are so many mimics out there. There's so many people that will try to do a quick and dirty job, and they just don't have the quality. And Gary is such a stickler. I've been in his laboratories, I've been to his distilleries, and I've talked to the scientists who work for him, the microbiologists and chemists and electronic technician type people, and he just goes the extra mile to make sure that these oils are the original and the purest quality. Now, where do they fit in here? They were the original source of medicine, and if you go to the Bible, you'll find about 1,000 places where actually the essential oils, either as incense or as oils, are directly mentioned in the Bible as medicines, as coming directly from God. And they're very high in what I'm calling here the C content. That's the consciousness content. These oils are actually conscious. They actually carry the intelligence. They're high in energy, and that is expressed through frequency. You probably heard this, but there's more than that. They're high in consciousness, true units of consciousness. So when you add conscious intelligence to high levels of energy, you have something that is truly alive, that will support life and promote negative entropy. That's another big word. Dr. Neppy and I have called it extropy and ordropy and several things, but it means just meaning and purpose and order. It's the opposite of entropy, disorder. And so the oils really promote that in your body and in your environment. Now, medicine is an assistant. It's not the final word, and even the founder of Young Living, Dr. Gary, would certainly agree with me on this, that we need the medicines because not all of us are able to concentrate and achieve instant healing just through focusing on on the energies and within us. So we need all the help we can get. And we need something that's natural versus man-made, which is man-made for the main purpose of making money, and the whole purpose of medicine is lost there in the pharmaceutical companies. Young Living Essential Oils has not fallen into that trap. That's why Young Living promotes essential oils the way they do, because they know that if they were put out there, they were patented and they were synthesized and so forth, the real essence would be lost. Now, the true unit analysis, which is something brand new, actually will show the level of consciousness within these oils. So you need to use natural medicine and go to the source. That's the key. The key is to be aware and active participation. We like to encourage people to take responsibility for your own health and wellness. And that involves awareness, knowing where the organs in your body are, knowing what they need, and supplying them with it. Transcendental Physics and Young Living Essential Oils. Plants and plant essences are the original medicine. Real medicine contains consciousness. True units allow us to analyze natural organic compounds and therapeutic grade essential oils. And this is my last slide. This is, in my opinion, is an unbeatable combination. Transcendental Physics plus Young Living therapeutic grade essential oils equals conscious healing.
And I would add to that that God is the only healer, but when you do your part and you show up and you do everything you can and have faith in Him, He will use these things to heal you in ways you cannot begin to imagine. And in the Bible, it says He sent them out with oils to preach and to heal and to minister to His children. So this is, to lay hands on people and help them to feel God's presence, because God is in each one of us. He gave us that gift as His children. And when you have turned to God in Christ, you have the ability to empower those oils with a greater energy, and that's God's divine energy. You have the ability to draw on the energy of the whole universe as a child of God. And that's how you can. I always say prayer and oils, you've got one of the most powerful options in the world. But if you don't understand that power, and that's what this does, it helps you understand the power God has given each one of us to be able to help ourselves and help other people. So, Ed, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, I would just say amen to everything you just said, and I think that's pretty much it.
Okay, so if you'll go to the next slide, where if anybody has any questions, we've had one submitted, but if anybody has any other questions, go ahead and submit them now, and I'll answer this one. This came in from Elizabeth. She said, is it possible to have the PowerPoint slides from this webinar emailed to participants? And Elizabeth, no, I really do apologize, but we're not able to do that. We will have this, a video recording of this up on our website under the monthly oils training, and it'll be there for at least a month. It may be there longer if there's enough interest in it. And you're welcome to view it or share it with others from that website. But if we just can't get into sending out slides, number one, the files are so large it becomes problematic, and number two, that would take a lot of time that we just don't have, unfortunately. But you're welcome to view the video anytime. If I can post it to YouTube, it'll be up on YouTube for quite a long time, but it certainly will be up on our website, www.naturesmoldrx, starting hopefully by Monday, and then after a month or so, it may be gone from there, but that will give you at least that amount of time to at least a month to be able to review it again. Yeah, you said I'm new and this is my first webinar and was looking forward to more information on the oils and their exact benefits. I do understand that, and we did make that announcement at the beginning that this was going to be a slightly different training this time. But some of you came on late, so I do apologize if you missed that introduction and didn't know that. We did try to bring it back into the oils, and next month I can tell you that we're going to be doing a presentation that is solely and totally and only focused on oil products. So it'll be healing from, or I can't remember the exact title of it, but it'll be healing from God's garden or something like that. Natural remedies from God's garden next month. So for those of you who missed the intro, again, I do apologize if you got something you weren't expecting. Let's see, are there any more questions? Let me see if I can find out here. Oh, we're getting great. Thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions. I'm just going to check one more time and see. Okay, I don't see any additional questions, so if that's it for today, then we really want to thank you for being here. And until next month, this is Jackie Close saying, may this holy season, Easter's coming up soon, we wish you all a very blessed Easter. So may this holy season be filled with treasured memories that last a lifetime. And may you be blessed with faith, hope, joy, gratitude, and vibrant health.
And understanding.
And understanding. Goodbye for now. God bless everyone.
Goodbye.
Please listen carefully to the following required disclaimer and copyright notice. The information shared during this event is for educational purposes only and is not medical advice. Everyone is an individual with different body types, different blood types, and different body chemistries. And it's important to remember that what works for one person may not work the same for another. The decision to use any of this information is the sole responsibility of the listener. Any products, techniques, and/or personal usage tips referred to are not suggested as a replacement for proper treatment from a licensed healthcare professional. We're not medical doctors or healthcare professionals, and FDA regulations prohibit the use of medical claims in conjunction with the sale of any product not approved by the FDA. Statements made herein have not been evaluated by the FDA. The material presented today is copyrighted, copyright EJC Advantage LLC, Jacqueline A. Close and Edward R. Close, and all rights remain the property of the speakers and EJC Advantage LLC. It may not be posted, copied, or transmitted through any means whatsoever without our written permission. You're welcome to share a link to our website or refer people to www.naturesmoldrx.com if you wish to share this information. Okay, everybody, have a great month, and we look forward to talking with you again soon. If you have questions that you want to get answered, you're always welcome to email me at any time. And If you're in our group, you already have my email. If you're not in our group, then please contact the person who referred you to this program and ask them to get the help for you. Okay? Have a great day. Have a great month. Bye-bye for now.